The bullet grazed Faith Jensen's shoulder as she threw herself behind the water trough, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. 23 days. 23 days since the outlaws had taken over her father's ranch, killed him in cold blood, and kept her prisoner in what had once been her own home. 23 days of praying every single night that someone, anyone, would come riding down that dusty road and save her from this nightmare. It was late summer in 1878, and the Kansas heat beat down mercilessly on the sprawling ranch 5 miles outside Great Bend. Faith's once pristine white blouse was stained with dirt and sweat, her auburn hair matted against her scalp. At 22 years old, she had imagined her life would be so different. She had imagined running the ranch with her father until she found a good man to marry, someone kind and decent who would love the land as much as they did. Instead, she was hiding behind a water trough while Dalton Creevy and his gang of 6 men terrorized her home. "Come on out, Faith!" Dalton's voice rang across the yard. "You know we are not going to hurt you. We just want to make sure you are not getting any funny ideas about running off." Faith pressed her back against the rough wood, her breath coming in short gasps. She had tried to run 3 times in the past 3 weeks. The first time, they had caught her within an hour and dragged her back by her hair. The second time, she had made it almost to the main road before one of them spotted her. The third time, just yesterday, she had gotten as far as the creek before they had found her. Each time, Dalton had promised worse consequences if she tried again. But she would keep trying. She had to, because the alternative was staying here, becoming some kind of prize for whichever one of these animals Dalton decided to give her to. She knew her time was running out. She could see it in the way they looked at her, in the way their conversations grew quieter when she walked past. Every night she prayed. She prayed with a fervor she had never known before, begging God to send someone to help her. Her mother had died when Faith was just a child, and her father had raised her with a strong faith and a stronger backbone. But even backbones could break under enough pressure, and Faith felt hers cracking more with each passing day. "I am counting to 10, Dalton called out. 1, 2, 3. Faith closed her eyes and pressed her palms together. "Please," she whispered. "Please send someone, anyone. I cannot do this anymore." 4, 5, 6. She heard footsteps approaching. Heavy boots on packed earth. Her fingers curled into fists. 7, 8. And then, like a crack of thunder on a clear day, a gunshot rang out. But it had not come from Dalton's gun. It had come from somewhere beyond the ranch gate. Faith's eyes snapped open. She heard shouting, the sound of men scrambling for cover. Another gunshot, then another. She pressed herself lower against the trough, her heart now racing for an entirely different reason. "Who the hell are you?" Dalton's voice had lost its mocking edge. Now he sounded angry, threatened. "Name is Samuel Stone." The voice that answered was deep and steady, with a calm that seemed impossible given the situation. "And I am thinking you boys need to move along from this property." "This is none of your business, Cowboy. Ride on out of here before you get yourself killed." "I am making it my business. That woman you are terrorizing happens to be Faith Jensen, and this is her ranch. I knew her father, Tom Jensen. Good man. Heard in town what happened to him. Figured I would ride out and pay my respects." Faith's breath caught in her throat. Someone had come. Someone had actually come. She peered around the edge of the trough and saw him sitting tall on a massive chestnut stallion, his hat pulled low over his face. Even from this distance, she could see the glint of his rifle aimed steady at Dalton. "There are 7 of us," Dalton said, his voice dripping with threat. "And one of you. Do the math." "I did the math. That is why I brought these." Samuel Stone's voice remained unnervingly calm. "Got 12 shots in this rifle and a revolver with 6 more. That is 18 shots for 7 men. Seems like odds in my favor." One of Dalton's men, a wiry fellow named Pike, moved to draw his weapon. The crack of Samuel's rifle split the air, and Pike's hat went flying off his head. Pike froze, his hand hovering over his gun. "Next one will not be aimed at your hat," Samuel said. "Now, I am going to say this one more time. Mount up and ride out. Leave the woman alone. This does not have to end badly for you." Faith watched as Dalton's face twisted with rage and calculation. She knew what he was thinking. 7 against 1 should be easy odds, even with the stranger getting the drop on them. But there was something about the way Samuel Stone sat that horse, something about the certainty in his voice that gave even Dalton pause. "This is not over," Dalton finally spat. "Come on, boys." "Actually, it is over." Samuel's rifle did not waver. "Because if I see any of you anywhere near this ranch again, or anywhere near Miss Jensen, I will not be giving warnings. I will not be aiming for hats. We clear?" The silence stretched out like taffy. Faith held her breath. Finally, Dalton gave a curt nod and jerked his head toward the horses tied near the barn. The 7 men mounted up, Dalton shooting one last venomous look in Faith's direction before spurring his horse toward the road. Samuel Stone sat motionless until the dust from their departure had settled on the horizon. Only then did he lower his rifle and dismount with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He was tall, Faith noticed as he walked toward her, with broad shoulders and long legs. His face was sun-weathered and strong-jawed, with eyes the color of a Kansas sky just before dawn, pale blue-gray and infinitely deep. "Miss Jensen," he said, his voice gentler now as he approached the water trough. "You can come out. They are gone." Faith tried to stand, but her legs had turned to water. 3 weeks of fear, of sleepless nights, and constant terror came crashing down on her all at once. She slumped against the trough, and suddenly Samuel Stone was there, his strong hands catching her before she could fall. "Easy now," he murmured. "I have got you. You are safe." Faith looked up into his face and felt something shift in her chest. His eyes were kind, she realized. Kind and concerned and utterly genuine. When was the last time someone had looked at her with genuine concern? "Thank you," she whispered, and then to her horror, she burst into tears. Samuel did not seem fazed. He simply held her steady, one hand on her elbow and the other hovering near her shoulder, giving her support without being presumptuous. "It is all right," he said quietly. "You have been through hell. Go ahead and cry." So she did. She cried for her father, for the ranch, for the 3 weeks of terror she had endured. She cried for the girl she had been before Dalton Creevy rode onto her property, and for the woman she had become in the aftermath. She cried until she had no tears left, and through it all, Samuel Stone stood steady as an oak tree, his presence solid and reassuring. When she finally pulled herself together, wiping her face with the back of her hand, she felt embarrassed. "I am sorry," she said. "That was not very dignified of me." "Dignity is overrated," Samuel replied with a hint of a smile, "especially when you have been terrorized for weeks." "How long were they here?" 23 days, Faith said. The number came out automatically. She had been counting each one. "They killed my father on the first day, shot him when he tried to stop them from taking the horses. Then they just stayed. Like they owned the place." Samuel's jaw tightened. "And they kept you prisoner." It was not a question, but Faith nodded anyway. "I tried to run 3 times. They always caught me. I was starting to think maybe God had forgotten about me." She looked up at him, truly seeing him for the first time. He was probably around 30, she guessed, with the weathered look of a man who had spent most of his life outdoors. There were fine lines around his eyes, laugh lines mixed with squint lines from staring into too many sunsets. His dark brown hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and there was a small scar on his chin that she found herself inexplicably drawn to. "Then you rode up." "I am sorry I did not come sooner." Samuel said. I only heard about your father yesterday. I have been up in Dodge City for the past month, working a cattle drive. Soon as I heard what happened, I rode straight here. You knew my father? Knew him, respected him. He helped me out once when I was in a tight spot, loaned me money when my own ranch was struggling, told me to pay him back when I could, never pressured me, never made me feel small about needing help. That is the kind of man he was. Samuel's expression grew distant. I paid him back last year, every cent with interest, but he refused to take the interest, said he was just glad to see me doing well. Fresh tears pricked Faith's eyes, but she blinked them back. That sounds like him. When I heard he had been killed by some outlaws who took over his place, I knew I had to come. Figured if his daughter was still alive, she might need help. Samuel looked around the ranch yard, taking in the neglected state of things. Looks like I figured right. Faith followed his gaze. The ranch looked nothing like it had a month ago. Her father had always kept everything neat and orderly, but now tools lay scattered across the yard. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges, and she could see broken whiskey bottles littering the porch of the house. They treated this place like their personal saloon, she said bitterly. Drank all my father's good whiskey, slaughtered 3 of our cattle for food, ran off most of the horses. I do not even know what is left anymore. We will figure it out, Samuel said. Then, seeming to realize how that sounded, he amended, that is, if you want help. I do not mean to presume, but I could stay for a few days, help you assess the damage and get things back in order. Faith looked at this stranger who had ridden in like an answer to her prayers, and she felt something she had not felt in weeks. Hope. I would appreciate that more than I can say. But I have to warn you, I do not have much money to pay you. They took most of what we had saved. Samuel waved a hand dismissively. I am not looking for payment. Your father helped me when I needed it. This is me returning the favor. He glanced toward the house. Now why don't we go inside and you can sit down properly? You look like you are about to fall over. He was right. Now that the adrenaline was fading, Faith felt exhausted to her very bones. She let Samuel guide her toward the house, his hand hovering near the small of her back without quite touching it. Such a gentleman, she thought. Such a stark contrast to the men who had been here before. Inside, the house was even worse than the yard. Furniture had been overturned, her mother's good china lay smashed on the floor, and the smell of stale alcohol and unwashed men permeated everything. Faith felt her heart sink. I know it looks bad, Samuel said, reading her expression. But it is just things. Things can be fixed, cleaned, replaced. You are alive and safe. That is what matters. Faith sank into one of the few chairs that was still upright. I do not even know where to start. You start by resting, Samuel said firmly. When is the last time you had a decent meal? Faith had to think about it. I do not remember. They let me eat their scraps mostly. I cooked for them, but they did not leave much for me. Samuel's expression darkened. Right. Well, that ends now. You sit there and rest. I am going to see what I can scrounge up in the kitchen. You can cook? Faith asked, surprised. Samuel's lips quirked. I have been a bachelor cowboy for most of my adult life, Miss Jensen. If I could not cook, I would have starved years ago. I may not make anything fancy, but I can promise it will be edible and filling. He was true to his word. Within 30 minutes, Faith could smell something delicious wafting from the kitchen. She found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks, lulled by the ordinary sounds of someone moving around her kitchen, the clink of pots and pans, the crackle of the stove. When Samuel emerged carrying 2 plates of bacon and eggs with thick slices of bread, Faith's stomach growled so loudly they both heard it. Samuel grinned. Good, you are hungry. That is a good sign. They ate in companionable silence. Faith tried to eat slowly, to maintain some semblance of manners, but the food was so good and she was so hungry that she found herself practically inhaling it. Samuel did not comment, just quietly offered her his second slice of bread when she finished her own. "Thank you," she said when the plate was finally empty. "That was the best meal I have had in weeks. It was just bacon and eggs. It was food that someone made for me with kindness," Faith said. "That makes all the difference." Something passed between them then, a moment of connection that made Faith's breath catch. Samuel held her gaze for a long moment before looking away, his expression unreadable. "You should rest," he said, standing to collect the plates. "You have been through an ordeal. I will start cleaning up out in the yard, get a sense of what needs doing." "I should help," Faith protested, but even as she said it, her body betrayed her with a massive yawn. Samuel shook his head. "You should sleep. There is a lot of work ahead, and you will be no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Go on now. I will be right outside if you need anything." Faith wanted to argue, but the truth was she could barely keep her eyes open. The combination of food, safety, and relief had made her overwhelmingly tired. "Just for an hour," she said. "Take as long as you need." Faith made her way to her bedroom, grateful to find that the outlaws had at least left this room relatively untouched. They had been sleeping in her father's room and the guest room, she realized with disgust. She shut the door, kicked off her boots, and lay down on her bed without even bothering to change clothes. She was asleep within seconds. When she woke, the light coming through her window told her it was late afternoon. She had slept for hours, not the 1 hour she had promised. Panic seized her for a moment, the fear that she would wake to find Samuel Stone gone and the outlaws returned. But then she heard sounds from outside. Hammering. Someone was hammering something. Faith got up, washed her face in the basin by her bed, and changed into a clean dress. It felt wonderful to be in clean clothes again. She brushed her hair, pinned it up properly, and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked different than she had 3 weeks ago. Thinner, with shadows under her eyes, and a hardness to her expression that had not been there before. But she was alive. She was free. And Samuel Stone was outside, fixing her ranch. She found him working on the barn door, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He had cleaned up the yard considerably. The broken bottles were gone, the tools had been gathered and organized, and he had even swept the porch. "You have been busy," she said, announcing her presence. Samuel looked up and smiled, and Faith felt that odd flutter in her chest again. "You are awake. Feeling better?" "Much better. I cannot believe I slept so long." "You needed it." He gestured around the yard. "I have made a start on things, but there is still a lot to do. I checked the barn. They left 2 horses, which is something. Not enough to run a ranch, but enough to get by for now. The cattle situation is worse. From what I can see, they slaughtered or ran off most of your herd." Faith felt her hopes sink. "So the ranch is finished." "I did not say that." Samuel set down his hammer and walked over to her. "It is a setback, definitely, but not the end. You still have the land, the buildings, 2 good horses. That is more than some people start with. But not enough to make a working ranch." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "What do you want to do?" "With the ranch, with your life? Do you want to stay here and try to rebuild? Or would you rather sell the land and start fresh somewhere else?" Faith had not let herself think about that question. It had seemed pointless when she was a prisoner, when her only goal was survival. But now, with the question laid out before her, she found she knew the answer immediately. "I want to stay," she said. "This is my home. My father built this place from nothing. My mother is buried here, and now my father is too. I am not going to let those men take that away from me." Samuel nodded, looking satisfied. "Good, then we will figure it out." "We?" He seemed to realize what he had said and looked slightly embarrassed. "I mean, I will help you figure it out, for as long as you need help." "You have your own ranch," Faith pointed out. "You cannot just stay here indefinitely." My ranch is small and pretty much runs itself, Samuel said. I have a good foreman who can handle things for a while. Besides, I meant what I said. Your father helped me when I needed it. I owe him this. You do not owe anyone anything. You already saved my life. Maybe so. Samuel's pale, blue, gray eyes met hers. But maybe I want to stay anyway. The air between them seemed charged somehow, heavy with unspoken things. Faith felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked away first. Well then, she said, trying to sound businesslike, I suppose we should make a proper plan, figure out exactly what we are working with and what needs to be done. They spent the rest of the afternoon doing just that. Samuel had a natural head for organization, Faith discovered. He made lists, prioritized tasks, and assessed the damage with a practical eye. By the time the sun was setting, they had a clear picture of the situation. It was not good, but it was not hopeless either. The ranch buildings were solid, just neglected and dirty. The land was good. They had 2 horses, about a dozen cattle that had not been slaughtered or run off, and a hen house full of chickens that had somehow survived. What they did not have was money, enough livestock to make the ranch profitable, or any hired hands to help with the work. First priority is security, Samuel said as they sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Those outlaws might come back, and even if they do not, word has probably spread that this place is vulnerable. We need to make sure you are protected. You think they will come back? I think Dalton Creevy struck me as the type who does not like being told what to do. He will stew on it for a while, maybe gather more men, and then he might try again. Samuel's voice was matter-of-fact, but Faith could hear the steel underneath. But if he does, he will find a very different situation than last time. What do you mean? I mean, I am going to teach you how to shoot properly, for one thing. Can you handle a gun? My father taught me when I was younger, but I am not very good. We will work on that. A woman living alone out here needs to know how to protect herself. He paused, then added, though you will not be alone, not while I am here. Faith felt that flutter again. She told herself it was just gratitude, just relief at not being alone anymore. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. There was something about Samuel Stone that drew her in. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes, or the strength in his hands, or the way he spoke to her like an equal instead of a helpless woman who needed to be managed. Or maybe it was just that he had ridden in when she needed him most, like an answer to her desperate prayers. What is your ranch like? She asked, wanting to know more about this man who had appeared in her life so suddenly. Samuel leaned back on his elbows, gazing out at the darkening landscape. Small. About 100 acres over near Larned. I run maybe 50 head of cattle, have a small house, a barn. Nothing fancy, but it is mine. Bought it 5 years ago with money I saved from working cattle drives. Your father's loan helped me buy my first breeding stock when I was starting out. No wife? The question slipped out before Faith could stop it, and she immediately felt her face burn. I am sorry, that was too personal. It is a fair question. Samuel's expression was untroubled. No wife. Came close once, about 3 years ago. Girl in Larned named Mary. Sweet thing. But she wanted a different life than I could offer. Wanted to move to a city, have fancy things. I am a rancher. Born and bred. Could not be happy anywhere else. So we parted ways. Do you regret it? Samuel considered this. I regret that I could not make her happy, but I do not regret staying true to what I needed. You cannot build a life with someone if you have to pretend to be someone you are not. Faith thought about this. That is wise. That is experience. He sat up and looked at her. What about you? I am surprised someone has not already snatched you up. Pretty young woman with a ranch? That is a good catch in these parts. Faith laughed, but it was a bitter sound. My father was protective. Maybe too protective. He did not think anyone was good enough for me. And the truth is, I was happy just working the ranch with him. I did not feel like I was missing anything. She paused. Until these past few weeks. Then I realized how alone I really was. You are not alone now. It was a simple statement, but it filled Faith with a warmth she had not felt in a long time. They sat there on the porch steps as true darkness fell, and for the first time since her father's death, Faith felt something like peace. The next several days fell into a rhythm. Samuel slept in the barn, insisting it was more proper that way, despite Faith's protests that the guest room was perfectly adequate. They rose with the sun, and Samuel started each day by giving Faith shooting lessons. She was not as bad as she thought. Her father had taught her the basics, and Samuel built on that foundation. He showed her how to aim properly, how to control her breathing, how to reload quickly. He was a patient teacher, never condescending, always encouraging. "Better," he said on the third day as Faith hit the target consistently. "Much better. You have a natural steadiness. That is good." After shooting practice, they worked on the ranch. They cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing away all traces of the outlaws. They repaired the barn door, fixed fences, and tended to the animals. Samuel proved to be a tireless worker, but he also made sure Faith took breaks and did not push herself too hard. In the evenings, they cooked dinner together. Faith discovered that Samuel had not been exaggerating about his cooking skills. He could make a decent stew, excellent biscuits, and even a passable apple pie using the preserved apples from Faith's cellar. They talked while they cooked and ate. Faith learned that Samuel had grown up on a ranch in Texas, that his parents had died when he was 17, that he had spent his 20s drifting from job to job before finally saving enough to buy his own place. He told her about cattle drives he had worked, about stampedes and river crossings and long nights under the stars. Samuel, in turn, learned about Faith's life, how her mother had died of fever when Faith was 8, how her father had taught her everything about running a ranch, how she loved the land, loved the work, loved the independence it gave her. "You are not like most women I have met," Samuel said one evening. They were sitting on the porch again, a habit they had fallen into. The Kansas night was warm, and fireflies danced in the darkness beyond the porch. "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" "A compliment. Definitely a compliment." He smiled. "You are strong, capable. You do not complain, even when the work is hard, and you have not let what happened to you break you." "I feel pretty broken sometimes," Faith admitted. "Broken and defeated are not the same thing. You are not defeated. You are still fighting. That takes strength." Faith looked at him in the dim light from the house. "I could not fight when I was alone, but having you here, it makes me feel like I can face anything." Samuel met her gaze, and Faith saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch, something warm and intense and entirely focused on her. "Faith," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Yes?" He seemed to struggle with something, then shook his head. "Nothing. We should probably get some rest. Big day tomorrow." Faith felt a pang of disappointment, though she could not have said what she was disappointed about. "What is happening tomorrow?" "I am riding into Great Bend. We need supplies, and I want to talk to the sheriff about what happened here. Make sure he knows to keep an eye out for Creevy and his gang." "I will come with you." Samuel hesitated. "Are you sure? Your first time back in town since everything happened might be hard." "I am sure. I cannot hide out here forever. People need to know I am alive and that the ranch is still operating." "All right then. We will go together." The ride into Great Bend the next morning was Faith's first time off the ranch since before the outlaws came. It felt strange to be out in the world again, but having Samuel beside her made it bearable. They rode their 2 horses side by side, taking the main road into town. Great Bend was a modest town. the county seat of Barton County, with a main street lined with businesses, a courthouse, a couple of saloons, and a church. It had grown considerably since the railroad came through, and now it served as a hub for ranchers and farmers in the area. People stared as Faith and Samuel rode down the main street. Faith held her head high, refusing to show any shame or embarrassment. She had nothing to be ashamed of. She was a victim, not a criminal. They tied their horses outside the sheriff's office and went inside. Sheriff Bill Morgan was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. He stood up when they entered, his expression a mix of surprise and relief. "Faith Jensen," he said. "Thank God. We heard what happened out at your place. I sent deputies out there twice, but both times they were driven off by the outlaws holding the ranch. I was planning to gather more men and go back out, but then we heard you might be dead." "I was their prisoner," Faith said steadily. "For 3 weeks. They killed my father and took over the ranch. I would still be there if not for Mr. Stone." She gestured to Samuel, who stepped forward and shook the sheriff's hand. "Samuel Stone. I knew Tom Jensen. When I heard what happened, I rode out to help." "And you got rid of the outlaws?" "I convinced them to leave. 7 of them, led by a man calling himself Dalton Creevy." "You know him?" The sheriff's expression darkened. "I know of him. He has been causing trouble up and down this part of Kansas for the past year. Robbery, theft, assault. We have wanted posters on him, but he is slippery. Never stays in one place long enough for us to catch him." "Well, he was at the Jensen Ranch for 3 weeks," Samuel said, "and I warned him that if he came back, it would not end well for him." "You should have killed him," the sheriff said bluntly. "Man like that does not learn. He will just cause trouble somewhere else." "Maybe so, but I was not going to shoot 7 men in front of Miss Jensen if there was another way." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Well, I will make sure my deputies know to keep an eye out. And I will send word to other towns. Let them know Creevy is back in the area." He turned to Faith. "I am sorry about your father, Faith. Tom was a good man, and I am sorry we could not help you sooner." "You tried," Faith said. "That is more than nothing." They spent the next hour in town, buying supplies and letting people know that Faith was alive and the ranch was back in operation. The general store owner, Mr. Patterson, offered to extend Faith credit until she could get back on her feet. The banker, Mr. Thornton, assured her that her father's accounts were still intact and that she had access to what little money remained. Several women from the church approached her with sympathy and casseroles. Faith accepted their kindness, though she felt disconnected from it all. These were people she had known her whole life, but the past 3 weeks had changed her. She felt like she was looking at them from a great distance. The only time she felt grounded was when Samuel stood beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. She found herself unconsciously moving closer to him in crowds, and he seemed to sense her discomfort, always positioning himself between her and anyone who got too close. On their way out of town, they passed the church. Faith felt a sudden urge and reined in her horse. "Can we stop for a moment?" she asked Samuel. "Of course." They tied up their horses, and Faith went inside the small white church. It was empty and cool, with light streaming through the plain glass windows. Faith walked up to the front pew and sat down, looking up at the simple wooden cross on the wall. Samuel sat beside her, quiet and patient. "I prayed so hard," Faith said softly. "Every single night I prayed for someone to come, for rescue. And then you showed up." She turned to look at him. "Do you believe in that? In prayers being answered?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "I believe in a lot of things," he finally said. "I believe in hard work and good horses and watching out for your neighbors. I believe in doing what is right, even when it is hard. As for prayers being answered, I do not know. But I do know that I heard about what happened to your father, and something in me knew I had to come. Maybe that was God, or maybe it was just my own conscience. Does it matter?" "I suppose not," Faith said. "I am just glad you came." So am I. Their eyes met, and Faith felt that electric connection again, stronger this time. She realized how close they were sitting, their shoulders almost touching. She could see flecks of darker blue in his gray eyes, could see the slight stubble on his jaw. Samuel, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned in slightly, his gaze dropping to her lips. Faith's heart hammered in her chest. Was he going to kiss her? Did she want him to? Yes, she realized. She wanted him to very much. But before anything could happen, the church door creaked open. They jerked apart, and Faith looked up to see Reverend Matthews entering the church. The older man smiled when he saw them. Faith, my dear girl, I heard you were in town. I am so glad to see you well. The moment was broken. Samuel stood and greeted the Reverend, and Faith followed suit, trying to calm her racing heart. They spoke with Reverend Matthews for a few minutes, accepting his condolences about her father and his offers of help from the congregation. By the time they left the church and rode back to the ranch, it was late afternoon. They worked in relative silence through the evening, but there was a new tension between them, an awareness. Faith caught herself watching Samuel as he worked, the way his muscles moved under his shirt, the way he pushed his hair back from his forehead when he was concentrating, the way he smiled when he caught her looking. That night, after dinner, they sat on the porch steps again. The silence between them was different now. Charged. Faith, Samuel said finally, I need to talk to you about something. Her heart sank. He was going to leave. She knew it. What is it? I have been here almost a week now, and I have been thinking about my ranch, my responsibilities. I need to go back, at least for a few days, make sure everything is all right. Faith tried to hide her disappointment. Of course, you have done so much already. I cannot expect you to stay forever. That is the thing. Samuel turned to face her fully. I do not want to leave. Not really. But I also do not want to presume. This is your ranch, your home. I have no claim here. And I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything, or like you have to let me stay out of obligation. Is that what you think? Faith asked. That I only want you here out of obligation. I do not know what to think. All I know is that these past few days, working beside you, eating meals with you, talking with you in the evenings, it has been the happiest I have been in years. And that scares me a little. Faith's breath caught. Scares you? I barely know you, Faith, but I feel like I have known you forever, and I am trying to be respectful, trying to give you space after what you have been through. But the truth is, I do not want to leave. I want to stay here and help you rebuild this ranch. I want to protect you and make sure nothing bad ever happens to you again. I want to sit on this porch with you every evening for the rest of my life. Faith felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears this time, happy tears. Samuel Stone, are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying I am falling in love with you, Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. I know it is too soon. I know you have been through hell and probably need time, but I cannot keep pretending I feel differently than I do. So I am telling you straight out, I am falling in love with you, and if you will have me, I would like to court you properly. And eventually, if you felt the same way, I would like to marry you and combine our ranches and build a life together. Faith felt like her heart might burst. You want to marry me? We have only known each other a week. I know. And I am not saying we need to get married tomorrow. I am saying I want to work toward that, if you want the same thing. He searched her face anxiously. Do you want the same thing? Faith thought about the past week, about how safe she felt with Samuel, about how easy it was to work beside him, to talk to him, to simply exist in his presence. She thought about how her heart had lifted every morning when she saw him, and how empty the evening would feel if he were not there to share it with. I want the same thing, she said, and watched his face light up with joy. I do not know if it is love yet, but I know it is something powerful, something real. You rode in like an answer to my prayers, Samuel, and every day since, you have shown me kindness and respect and partnership. You make me feel strong instead of weak. You make me want to fight for this ranch instead of giving up. So yes, I want you to stay. I want you to court me, and I want to see where this goes. Samuel's smile was brilliant. Can I kiss you? Faith laughed, giddy with happiness. Yes, please. He cupped her face gently with both hands and leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. But Faith had never been more certain of anything. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet and perfect. She felt it all the way down to her toes, a warmth that spread through her entire body. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. I have wanted to do that since that day in the church, Samuel admitted. I have wanted you to do it since then, too. They kissed again, longer this time. And then they sat on the porch steps with Samuel's arm around Faith's shoulders, looking out at the stars and talking about the future, about combining their ranches, about the work it would take, about the life they could build together. We will need more cattle, Samuel said practically, and more horses. I can sell my place and use the money to invest in stock for this ranch. Your land is better than mine anyway, more water sources. Are you sure you want to sell? That ranch is yours. You built it from nothing. And I will build this one into something even better. With you, he squeezed her shoulder. Besides, a ranch is just land and buildings. It is not a home unless you have someone to share it with. Over the next few weeks, Samuel did exactly what he proposed. He rode back to his ranch, spent 3 days settling his affairs, and returned with his foreman and everything he owned loaded into a wagon. He put his land up for sale and immediately began investing in the Jensen ranch. They bought cattle at auction, a good breeding stock that would form the foundation of a new herd. They hired 2 ranch hands, young men from Great Bend who were eager for steady work. They repaired fences and buildings and gradually brought the ranch back to life. Faith and Samuel worked side by side every day, and their relationship deepened with each passing week. Samuel continued to sleep in the barn, maintaining propriety despite his declared intentions. They stole kisses when they could, held hands while sitting on the porch, and talked late into the night about everything and nothing. Faith discovered that Samuel had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable. He made her laugh with wry observations about their ranch hands or town gossip. He also had a surprisingly gentle touch with the animals, and Faith often found him talking softly to the horses as he groomed them. Samuel learned that Faith was stronger than she looked, with a will of iron under her gentle exterior. She was not afraid of hard work or hard decisions. She also had a talent for organization and numbers, keeping their accounts and planning their investments with shrewd intelligence. 2 months after Samuel first rode onto the Jensen ranch, he asked Faith to marry him officially. They were riding out to check on the herd, the late October air crisp and clear, when Samuel reined in his horse on a rise overlooking the ranch. Faith, stop a minute. She pulled up beside him. What is it? Look at that. He gestured to the view below them. The ranch spread out in the valley, looking prosperous and well-maintained. Cattle grazed peacefully. The barn had a fresh coat of paint, and smoke rose from the chimney of the house. We did that. Together. We did, Faith agreed, feeling proud. Samuel dismounted and came over to help Faith down from her horse, but instead of releasing her when her feet touched the ground, he held onto her hands. Faith Jensen, these past 2 months have been the best of my life. You are smart and strong and beautiful, and I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and let me be your husband? Will you build this life with me, officially and forever? Faith felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. Yes, yes, Samuel, I will marry you. He stood up and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. Then he kissed her, deep and passionate, and Faith felt like she was flying. They were married 3 weeks later, in the same church where they had almost kissed that first time. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony. Half the town showed up, eager to celebrate. Faith wore a simple white dress that the church ladies had helped her make, and Samuel wore a new suit that made him look impossibly handsome. When Samuel lifted her veil and kissed her, making them officially husband and wife, Faith thought about that day nearly 4 months ago when she had been hiding behind a water trough, terrified and desperate, praying for rescue. She thought about how Samuel had ridden in like an answer from heaven, and now he was her husband, her partner, her future. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food contributed by what seemed like everyone in the county. There was music and dancing, and Faith danced with Samuel under the stars, feeling happier than she had ever thought possible. When the last guest had finally left and they were alone, Samuel carried Faith over the threshold of the house. Their house now, officially. He set her down gently in the front room, and they looked at each other, suddenly shy. "Hello, wife," Samuel said softly. "Hello, husband." He cupped her face in his hands. "I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret this." "I could never regret this. Never regret you." They made their way to Faith's bedroom, which was now their bedroom. And on their wedding night, they came together with tenderness and passion, sealing their commitment to each other in the most intimate way possible. The first years of their marriage were not easy. Running a ranch never was. There were harsh winters and dry summers, cattle that got sick, and hands that quit at inconvenient times. But Faith and Samuel faced every challenge together, and somehow that made even the hard times bearable. Samuel's ranch sold after 6 months, and they used the money to expand their herd significantly. Within a year, the Jensen Stone Ranch, as it was now known, was one of the most successful in the county. They hired more hands, built additional outbuildings, and even added a new wing to the house. Dalton Creevy and his gang never returned. The sheriff eventually caught up with them in Dodge City, where they made the mistake of robbing the wrong bank. 3 of them were killed in the ensuing shootout, and Dalton and the rest were hanged for murder. Faith felt nothing but relief when Samuel brought her the news. In the spring of 1880, Faith discovered she was pregnant. She was 24 now, and Samuel was 32, and they were both overjoyed. Samuel became even more protective than usual, barely letting Faith do any heavy work. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she protested one day as he physically removed a bucket from her hands. "I know, but humor me. I have never been a father before. I am allowed to be nervous." Their son was born in November of 1880, a healthy baby boy with his father's pale, blue-gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him Thomas after Faith's father and called him Tommy. Samuel was a devoted father. Faith often found him just standing over the cradle, watching Tommy sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with the baby when he cried at night, and sang ridiculous cowboy songs that somehow always made Tommy stop fussing. "You're a natural at this," Faith told him one night as she watched him soothe their son back to sleep. "I just love him so much," Samuel said simply. "And I love you. I never thought I could be this happy." 2 years later, they had a daughter. They named her Rose after Faith's mother. Rose had Samuel's dark hair and Faith's green eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "We are in trouble with this one," Faith said, laughing as she watched 6-month-old Rose bat her eyes at Samuel and get him to give her a third piece of bread at dinner. "I do not know what you mean," Samuel said, utterly failing to look innocent as he fed Rose another bite. "She has you completely under her spell." "Well, she gets that from her mother. You have had me under your spell since the day I rode onto this ranch." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered. Tommy grew into a sturdy little boy who loved horses and wanted to be just like his father. Rose grew into a sweet but strong-willed girl who had opinions about everything. In 1885, they had another son, Samuel Jr., though they called him Sam to avoid confusion. Sam was quieter than his siblings, more thoughtful, with a love for books that surprised both his parents. Where did he get that from? Samuel wondered as he watched 4-year-old Sam sit quietly with a picture book while Tommy and Rose ran wild in the yard. My mother loved to read, Faith said. Maybe it skipped a generation. They built onto the house again to accommodate their growing family, added a proper schoolroom where Faith taught the children their letters and numbers, hired a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese immigrant whose husband had died working on the railroad and who was grateful for the steady work and the way Faith and Samuel treated her with respect. The town of Great Bend grew around them. The railroad brought more people, more businesses. The wild, dangerous edge that had characterized Kansas in the 1870s gradually faded. Law and order became more established. The era of outlaws and gunfighters was giving way to something more civilized. But Faith never forgot those desperate weeks when she had been a prisoner on her own land. Never forgot the feeling of hopelessness, of praying for rescue and wondering if anyone would come. She made it a point to help people when she could. When a widow lost her husband and was about to lose her farm, Faith and Samuel quietly paid off her debts. When a young couple was struggling to start a ranch, they loaned them money at reasonable terms. "You are just like your father," Samuel told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. It was 1889 now. Faith was 33, Samuel was 41, and they had been married for nearly 11 years. "What do you mean?" "Helping people who need it, not expecting anything in return. That is what Tom did for me. And look how it turned out. I met you because I came to pay back a kindness." Faith took his hand. "Do you ever think about that day when you rode up and found me hiding behind the water trough?" "All the time. I think about how close I came to not coming at all. I had heard the news about your father, and part of me thought I should just stay out of it. It was not my business, but something pushed me to come anyway." "I was praying," Faith said quietly. "Every night I was praying for someone to save me. And then you appeared." Samuel brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I will always be grateful I did, because you saved me too." "I did not save you. You saved me. You saved me from a life alone, from a life without purpose beyond just existing. You gave me a family, a real home, a reason to get up every morning beyond just survival." He looked at her with those pale, blue-gray eyes that still made her heart skip a beat. "You saved me, Faith, as much as I saved you." They sat there on the porch, holding hands, as they had done countless times over the years. Faith thought about the journey that had brought them here, about the tragedy and terror that had preceded Samuel's arrival, about the hard work and love that had built this life. Tommy was 15 now, already as tall as his father, and eager to take on more responsibility with the ranch. Rose was 13, beautiful and spirited, with a dozen boys in town already hoping to court her someday. Sam was 9, still quiet and bookish, but showing signs of his father's steady strength. "Do you think they know how lucky they are?" Faith asked, nodding toward the house where their children were. "I do not know if children ever really understand their parents' love until they have children of their own. But I hope they feel it, even if they do not understand it yet. I hope they never have to go through what I went through to appreciate what we have." "They will not," Samuel said firmly. "That is what we are here for, to protect them, to give them a good life, to make sure they never have to pray for rescue because they will always be safe." In 1892, Tommy married a local girl named Elizabeth, and they built a small house on the western edge of the ranch property. A year later, Faith and Samuel became grandparents when Elizabeth gave birth to a baby girl they named Faith after her grandmother. Granddaughter Faith and grandmother Faith, Samuel said, cradling the tiny baby with the same wonder he had shown with his own children. That is going to get confusing. We will figure it out, Faith said, watching her husband with their grandchild and feeling her heart overflow with love. Rose eventually fell in love with a young lawyer in Great Bend, a smart and kind man named Henry who treated her like a queen. They married in 1895, and Rose moved into town, though she visited the ranch every week. Sam surprised everyone by announcing at age 16 that he wanted to go to college. I love the ranch, he told his parents, but I want to learn more, want to see what else is out there. Faith and Samuel supported his decision, though it was hard to see him go. He went to Kansas State University and eventually became a teacher, coming back to Great Bend to teach at the local school. He never married, seemed content with his books and his students, and Faith worried about him sometimes. He is happy, Samuel assured her. Not everyone needs a spouse and children to be complete. Let him live his life his own way. As the century turned and the 1890s gave way to the 1900s, Faith and Samuel slowed down. They handed more of the ranch responsibilities to Tommy, though they still helped where they could. They spent their days working in the garden, playing with their growing number of grandchildren, and sitting on the porch in the evenings watching the sunset. The world was changing. Automobiles were starting to appear in Great Bend. Electricity was being installed in town. The Wild West of Faith's youth was becoming a memory, a story told to children who could barely imagine a time when outlaws roamed freely and justice was uncertain. But some things did not change. Faith still reached for Samuel's hand without thinking about it. Samuel still looked at Faith like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still thanked God for the day Samuel rode onto the ranch like an answer to Faith's prayers. In the spring of 1910, Samuel fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then developed into something more serious. The doctor said it was pneumonia, complicated by Samuel's age. He was 62 now, and his body was not as strong as it once had been. Faith nursed him with fierce determination, refusing to accept that she might lose him. She sat by his bedside day and night, reading to him, talking to him, holding his hand. Their children came and went, worried and sad, but Samuel always rallied when Faith was there. "You are not allowed to leave me," Faith told him one night when they were alone. She was 54 now, her auburn hair streaked with gray, but her green eyes were as fierce as ever. "Do you hear me, Samuel Stone? You promised to spend the rest of your life making sure I never regretted marrying you. You cannot keep that promise if you die." Samuel smiled weakly. "I am trying, sweetheart. But we do not always get to choose these things." "Yes, we do. You chose to ride onto my ranch that day instead of just staying out of it. You chose to face down 7 outlaws. You chose to stay and help me rebuild. So choose this. Choose to get better." Samuel squeezed her hand. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. That is why you love me. One of many reasons." Whether it was Faith's determination, Samuel's will to live, or simple good fortune, Samuel did recover. It took months, and he was never quite as strong as he had been before, but he survived. By summer, he was back on the porch with Faith, moving more slowly but still there. "You scared me," Faith said one evening as they sat together, a blanket over Samuel's lap despite the warm weather. "I scared myself," Samuel admitted. "For a while there, I thought I was going to have to leave you, and I could not stand the thought of it. Do not do that again. I will try my best." They had 10 more good years, 10 years of watching grandchildren grow, of seeing Tommy take over the ranch completely, of quiet mornings and peaceful evenings. Samuel moved even more slowly as the years passed, and Faith's own body began to show its age, but they were together. That was all that mattered. In 1920, Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. Faith, who was 64, woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. She did not cry at first. She simply sat there, holding his hand, remembering the way he had ridden in like salvation itself, remembering his kindness, his strength, his unwavering love, remembering 42 years of marriage, of partnership, of devotion. "Thank you," she whispered to him. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for building this life with me." The funeral was huge. It seemed like everyone in Great Bend and the surrounding ranches showed up to pay their respects. Samuel Stone had been a good man, a fair employer, a devoted husband and father. People told stories about his generosity, his quiet strength, his steady presence. Faith stood through it all with dry eyes and a straight back, accepting condolences with grace. It was only later, when everyone had gone and she was alone in the house they had shared for so long, that she finally cried. She sat on the porch steps, where they had sat together countless times, and let herself grieve. Her children wanted her to move in with one of them, but Faith refused. "This is my home," she said firmly. "This is where your father and I built our life. I am not leaving." She lived for 10 more years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1930 at the age of 74. Her last conscious thought was of Samuel, of the way he had looked that first day when he rode onto her ranch. In her dreams that night, she saw him again, young and strong, riding toward her on his chestnut stallion, and she knew that wherever she was going, he would be there waiting for her. Tommy inherited the ranch and ran it successfully for another 30 years. He told his children and grandchildren the story of how their grandfather had saved their grandmother, how Samuel Stone had ridden in like an answer from heaven and given Faith Jensen a reason to keep fighting. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, each one adding their own stories to the land. But the story that was told most often, the one that became legend in the family, was the story of Faith and Samuel, of desperate prayers and miraculous rescue, of love that grew from gratitude into something deep and true and lasting, of a cowboy who rode in when he was needed most, and a woman who had the courage to grab hold of the life he offered her and build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. Their graves sit side by side in the Great Bend Cemetery, under a shared headstone that reads simply Samuel Stone, 1848-1920, and Faith Stone, 1856-1930. Partners in life and love. And on days when the Kansas wind blows just right, people swear they can almost hear the echo of laughter and the sound of two people talking quietly together, building a life one conversation at a time on a porch that no longer exists but will never be forgotten.